In the shadow of Smuggler's Rest, a cursed estate hides a deadly secret. Captain Silas Golding, a man of greed and gold, is murdered, his blood staining the cliffs. But who struck the fatal blow? Was it Lady Beatrice, driven by betrayal? Miss Evans, bound by fierce loyalty? Chapter 1. The Whisper of the Tidite was a brisk October morning in 1929 when I, Captain Arthur Hastings, found myself ensconced in the cozy sitting room of Hercule Poirot's London flat at Whitehaven Mansions. The air was fragrant with the scent of his favored tisane, and the room, as always, was a study in precision, every book aligned, every cushion plumped to perfection. Poirot, his egg-shaped head tilted thoughtfully, was perusing a letter with the intensity of a jeweler examining a rare gem. "Hastings," he said, his green eyes sparkling with that familiar blend of curiosity and amusement. "The world, it never ceases to offer its puzzles. Here is an invitation that promises intrigue. Listen, mon ami." He adjusted his pince-nez and read in his precise, accented tones. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, I write to request your presence at Cliffhaven House, my coastal estate in Devon, for a small gathering this weekend. We are to celebrate the recent acquisition of a rare artifact, a golden statuette of Phoenician origin, unearthed near our shores. Its discovery has stirred excitement, but also whispers of smuggling and ill fortune among the locals. I fear these rumors may unsettle my guests, and your keen mind would bring clarity and calm. Captain Hastings, if available, is most welcome. A car will meet you at Exeter Station Friday. 3:00 single quotes clock. Yours sincerely, Lord Percival Drayton." Poirot folded the letter with care, his mustache twitching. "What do you make of it, Hastings? A golden statuette, smuggling rumors and unease. It has the air of a mystery, non?" I leaned back, lighting my pipe. "Sounds like a rich man's whim. Poirot, Lord Drayton shipping magnate, isn't he? Probably wants to flaunt his treasure and have a famous detective on hand to impress his guests. Smuggling talk is likely just village gossip." Poirot's smile was indulgent. "Ah, Hastings, you see the surface, but not the depths. Why mention ill fortune? Why invite Hercule Poirot to a mere celebration? No, there is a shadow beneath. The politeness. We shall go, mon ami. Pack for the sea air." The little gray cells sense a storm brewing. 2 days later, we alighted at Exeter Station, where a sleek Bentley awaited, driven by a taciturn chauffeur named Stokes. The drive to Cliffhaven House wound through rugged Devon cliffs, the sea crashing below in frothy waves. The estate emerged, like a sentinel against the horizon, a sprawling Victorian mansion of grey stone, perched precariously above the rocky shore, its windows glinting like wary eyes as we approached. Lord Percival Drayton greeted us at the grand entrance, a robust man in his 60s with a weathered face and a commanding presence. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, welcome to Cliffhaven. Your presence is a relief amidst these turbulent whispers." Poirot bowed slightly. "Monsieur Drayton, it is a pleasure. This statuette of yours, it is of great interest, I understand." "A marvel," Drayton replied, ushering us into a hall adorned with maritime paintings. "Found in a shipwreck off our coast, Phoenician, 8th century BC. My archaeologist friend, Professor Mortimer Vance, is cataloging it. We'll unveil it tomorrow evening with a bit of ceremony. But come, meet the others." He led us to the drawing room, a spacious chamber with sea views, where a fire crackled against the autumn chill. The gathered company turned, their conversations pausing. I sensed an undercurrent of tension beneath their polished smiles. Lady Beatrice Drayton, Percival's wife, was a striking woman in her 50s, her sharp eyes scanning us like a hawk. "Monsieur Poirot, how delightful," she said, offering a gloved hand. "Your reputation precedes you." Their niece, Miss Clara Drayton, a vivacious woman of 25, smiled warmly. "Welcome to Cliff Haven. I hope you'll enjoy our little spectacle." Despite the local tales of curses, Mr. Julian Carver, a lean, intense man in his 40s, was introduced as Drayton's business partner in shipping. His handshake was firm, but his eyes darted nervously. "A pleasure, Poirot. Percival's told me of your unique methods." Professor Mortimer Vance, the archaeologist, was a weary man with a shock of white hair and an enthusiastic air. "Monsieur Poirot, this statuette is extraordinary gold, inscribed with Venetian script. A smuggler's relic, perhaps, but a treasure nonetheless." Mrs. Evelyn Marwood, a widowed cousin of Lady Beatrice, was a plump, anxious woman in her late 40s, clutching a lace handkerchief. "Oh, I do hope there's no trouble," she murmured. "These smuggling stories unsettle me." Reverend Thomas Hale, the local vicar, was a dour man with a pinched face. "I must protest this display of pagan relics," he said stiffly. "It invites misfortune." The servants were discreet. Stokes, the chauffeur, Mrs. Penrose, the stern housekeeper, and Rose, a timid maid who served tea with trembling hands as we settled with cups of Darjeeling. Talk turned to the statuette. Drayton waxed enthusiastic. "It's a symbol of ancient trade routes. Poirot, Vance believes it was smuggled ashore centuries ago, hidden in the cliffs. Tomorrow's unveiling will put Cliff Haven on the map." Vance nodded. "The inscriptions suggest a ritual purpose, possibly tied to a sea deity. But the smuggling rumor's local superstition, I assure you." Reverend Hale frowned. "Superstition or not, such relics stir unrest. The village speaks of a smuggler's cursed death to those who disturb the gold." Clara laughed lightly. "Oh, Uncle, it's 1929. Surely we're past such nonsense." Lady Beatrice's eyes flickered. "Let's not tempt fate, Clara. Monsieur Poirot, tell us of your methods. How do you unravel such mysteries?" Poirot sipped his tea. "Order and method, madam." The little gray cells observed the details others missed: the glance, the word, the silence. Truth reveals itself to those who listen. As dusk fell, Drayton suggested a walk to the cliff edge, where a smuggler's cave, recently explored, lay. Below, the sea roared, and the cave's mouth gaped like a dark secret. Poirot studied it thoughtfully. "A place of concealment, monsieur." "Indeed," Drayton said. "The statuette was found nearby. Smugglers used these caves for centuries." Dinner was a formal affair, with crystal gleaming under candlelight. The conversation was strained. Carver mentioned shipping losses. Clara spoke of her engagement to a London lawyer, and Mrs. Marwood fretted about the weather. By 10, we retired, my room overlooking the turbulent sea, as I bid Poirot good night. He said softly, "Sleep well, Hastings, but keep your senses sharp. The tide, it brings secrets to shore." Little did I know how soon those secrets would surface. Chapter 2. The cry in the ninth night at Cliff Haven House was restless, the sea's ceaseless roar mingling with the creak of the old mansion's timbers. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, retired to my room with a sense of unease, the talk of smuggling, curses, and the tense undercurrents at dinner lingering in my mind. My window overlooked the jagged cliffs, where moonlight danced on the waves below, casting eerie shadows that seemed to writhe like specters. I dismissed such fancies as the effects of a long journey and a rich meal, and by 11 o'clock, I was drifting into an uneasy sleep. A piercing scream shattered the silence, jerking me upright. It came from within the house, sharp and desperate, followed by a thud that seemed to echo through the walls. My heart pounded as I threw on my dressing gown and seized my service revolver from my suitcase, a habit from my army days. The corridor was dark, save for a flicker of lamplight from below. I hurried toward the sound, my slippers muffled on the thick carpet. At the foot of the grand staircase, I found Rose, the maid, trembling, her face pale as she clutched a candle. "Oh, sir," she gasped. "It came from the library. Someone's hurt. I know it." I steadied her, my military instincts kicking in. "Stay here, Rose. I'll fetch Poirot." I rapped sharply on his door, "to rooms down." He emerged almost instantly, impeccably dressed despite the hour, his eyes alert. "Hastings, what is this commotion?" he demanded, his voice calm but urgent. A scream, Poirot from the library. Rose heard it too. "Come quickly." We descended to the main hall, where others were gathering. Lady Beatrice in a silk robe, her face composed but her eyes wide. Clara, her hair loose, clutching a shawl, and Mrs. Penrose, the housekeeper, her stern features taut with alarm. Stokes, the chauffeur, appeared from the servants' quarters, his shirt half buttoned, while Reverend Hale arrived, muttering prayers. Julian Carver and Mrs. Marwood followed, both disheveled, and Professor Vance was last, his nightshirt tucked hastily into trousers. Lord Drayton was conspicuously absent. Poirot took charge, his small frame commanding despite the chaos. "Mesdames et messieurs, remain here. Hastings, with me." He led the way to the library, a heavy oak door ajar at the end of the hall. The air grew colder as we approached, a draught seeping through. Inside, the scene was grim. Lord Percival Drayton lay sprawled on the Persian rug, his head near an overturned bronze statuette of a ship, its base smeared with blood. A pool of crimson stained the rug beneath his temple, and his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. The French windows stood open, curtains billowing in the night breeze, and a faint trail of sand dusted the floor near the threshold. A small desk lamp cast a harsh glow, illuminating scattered papers and a glass of brandy, untouched. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands careful not to disturb the scene. "Mort Hellas," he murmured. A blow to the head, delivered with force. The statuette, it seems, was the weapon. I felt a chill, not from the open windows but from the reality of murder. Good Lord, Poirot, who could have done this? The scream Rose said it came from here. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, sharp as a hawk's. The scream. It was likely Lady Drayton or Clara, alerted by the noise. But observe, Hastings, the sand on the floor, the open window. Someone wishes us to believe the killer fled outside. Yet, he moved to the windows, examining the frame. No footprints in the garden below, only sand here. Inside. Curious, non? Lady Beatrice's voice cut through the silence as she appeared at the door, her composure cracking. "Percival," she cried, clutching the frame. Clara followed, sobbing, and Mrs. Marwood let out a wail, fainting into Carver's arms. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Madam, mademoiselle, I beg you, do not approach the scene. It must remain untouched. Monsieur Carver, please escort Madame Marwood to the drawing room. Madame Penrose, summon the police at once." Mrs. Penrose nodded, hurrying off, while Stokes muttered, "I'll check the grounds, sir. Someone might still be out there." "Non," Poirot said sharply. "No one leaves until the police arrive." Monsieur Stokes, you will stay. The chauffeur hesitated, then nodded, his jaw tight. Reverend Hale began to pray aloud, his words a low drone, while Vance peered over Poirot's shoulder. The statuette, Vance whispered. It's one of mine kept on the mantel. How could this happen? Poirot ignored him, his attention. On the desk, a small key, tarnished and old, lay beside the brandy glass, glinting faintly. Hastings, note the key. It is not part of the desk's lock. And these papers. He lifted a sheet carefully, a shipping manifest, dated a week ago, with a circled entry. Cargo unlisted, 10 crates, delivered to Cliff Haven. By 1 o'clock, the local police arrived, led by Inspector Japp, an old acquaintance from Scotland Yard who happened to be in Devon on another case. His familiar bulldog face was grim as he surveyed the scene. Poirot, you've a knack for landing in trouble. Lord Drayton, looks like a nasty business. Robbery gone wrong. Inspector, Poirot replied, his tone measured. This is no robbery. The statuette remains, the room undisturbed save for the body. This is murder. Deliberate and calculated. Japp scratched his chin. Right, then. We'll seal the house, no one in or out. I'll need statements from everyone. Poirot, you're not officially on this, but, well, I know you'll poke about anyway. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. The little gray cells, they are already at work. Mon ami, Hastings, let us assist by observing. The truth, it hides in the details. As Japp's men photographed the scene, and the body was covered, the household gathered in the drawing room. A somber tableau under the flickering chandelier. Lady Beatrice sat rigid, her hands clasped. Clara wept quietly. Carver paced, his eyes darting. And Mrs. Marwood, revived, clutched her handkerchief. Vance muttered about the statuette. Hale prayed, and the servants stood stiffly, Rose trembling, beside Mrs. Penrose. Stokes glared at the floor, his fists clenched. I whispered to Poirot. The open window, the sand, it points to an outsider, doesn't it? Someone from the village, stirred up by those smuggling tales. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Hastings, you leap to the obvious. The sand, it is too convenient, placed to mislead. The key, the manifest. The statuette, these are the threads of truth. Someone in this house knows more than they say. As the clock struck 2, Japp began his interviews, but I could see Poirot's mind was already weaving the clues into a pattern. Only he could discern. The night's cry had unveiled a crime, and Cliff Haven House was now a stage for Hercule Poirot's genius. Chapter 3. The air of Alth dawn broke grey and heavy over Cliff Haven House, the sea's restless churn mirroring the turmoil within. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, had barely slept, the image of Lord Drayton's lifeless form etched in my mind. The library, now sealed by Inspector Japp's men, stood as a grim reminder of the night's violence, and the household moved like specters, their faces drawn with shock and suspicion. Breakfast was a somber affair in the dining room, the clink of china and the murmur of subdued voices punctuating the silence. Poirot, impeccable as ever in his tailored suit and polished shoes, sipped his coffee with an air of calm detachment, his green eyes scanning the room. Lady Beatrice presided over the table, her composure a brittle mask, while Clara, pale and red-eyed, toyed with her toast. Julian Carver sat stiffly, his gaze fixed on his plate, and Mrs. Marwood, still shaken, sipped tea with trembling hands. Professor Vance, his enthusiasm for the statuette dimmed, muttered about rescheduling the unveiling. While Reverend Hale offered a prayer for Drayton's soul, his voice heavy with foreboding, the servants Mrs. Penrose, Rose, and Stokes served. With mechanical precision, their eyes avoiding contact, Inspector Japp joined us, his notebook in hand, looking as though he, too, had forgone sleep. "Morning, all?" he said gruffly. "I've wired Scotland Yard for reinforcements, but for now, we're a closed circle. No one leaves Cliff Haven until we've got answers." "Poirot, you've been quiet. What's on your mind?" Poirot set down his cup, his mustache twitching. "The mind, Inspector, is always at work. The little grey cells, they observe the silences as much as the words. Monsieur Drayton's death, it is no random act. The sand, the key, the manifest, they speak of a purpose, a plan." I leaned forward, eager to contribute. "Japp, the open window, surely it suggests someone came from the cliffs. Perhaps a smuggler after that golden statuette." Japp nodded. "That's my line of thinking, Hastings. The village is full of tales about smugglers' loot hidden in those caves. Maybe Drayton crossed someone dangerous." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Non, Ms. The window. It is a stage prop. No footprints outside, yet sand inside. It is placed to deceive the killer. They are among us, in this house." A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Beatrice's fork clattered against her plate, and Carver's jaw tightened. Clara whispered, "But who would do such a thing?" Uncle Percival was stern, but not cruel. Poirot's gaze softened. "Mademoiselle, the heart of man hides many motives. We shall uncover them. But first, we must know the movements of all last night." Japp took the cue, addressing the group. "Right? I'll need your alibis for midnight." When the scream was heard, "Let's start with you, Lady Drayton." Lady Beatrice straightened, her voice steady. "I was in my room, reading. I heard the scream and came downstairs, finding Rose in the hall." Clara nodded. "I was asleep, but the scream woke me. I ran to the landing and saw Rose, then Mother." Carver cleared his throat. "I was in the billiard room, having a nightcap. The scream brought me to the hall." Mrs. Marwood dabbed her eyes. "I was in bed, but I'm a light sleeper. I heard the cry and followed the others." Vance adjusted his spectacles. "I was in my study, reviewing notes on the statuette. I heard the commotion and came at once." Reverend Hale clasped his hands. "I was praying in my room, as is my habit. The scream startled me, and I joined the others." Mrs. Penrose spoke briskly. "I was in the servants' quarters, checking the linen inventory. Rose's cry alerted me." Rose, barely audible, said, "I was in the kitchen, fetching water. I heard the scream and ran to the stairs." Stokes shifted uncomfortably. "I was in my room above the garage. Took me a minute to get dressed and come in." Japp scribbled furiously, then looked at Poirot. "Sounds like everyone's accounted for, but alibis need checking. Poirot, care to poke around while my men search the grounds?" Poirot inclined his head. "With pleasure, Inspector. Hastings, we shall begin with the library, then the cliffs. The scene, it holds secrets yet." We returned to the library, now guarded by a constable. The blood-stained rug had been covered, but the statuette, key, and papers remained as we'd found them. Poirot examined the sand trail, his magnifying glass glinting. "Hastings, observe the sand is coarse, like that from the cave, yet it stops abruptly. No smudges, no footprints beyond the window. It was sprinkled deliberately." I frowned. "So the killer never left through the window." Precisement. They wished us to think so. But they remained inside, perhaps to stage the scene further. He turned to the desk, lifting the manifest. This unlisted cargo, 10 crates, delivered last week. Why circle it? And this key, it fits no lock here. He pocketed the key with a thoughtful hum, then moved to the statuette, its bronze base still crusted with blood. A heavy piece, yet not the golden statuette of which Drayton spoke. Where is that treasure? I wonder. We ventured to the cliffs, the wind biting as we descended a narrow path to the smuggler's cave. The entrance was damp, its walls slick with seaweed. Poirot studied the ground, noting scuff marks. Recent activity, Hastings. Someone has been here, perhaps to hide or retrieve something. Back at the house, Jap was interviewing Rose in the drawing room. The maid's voice trembled. I swear, sir, I only heard the scream. I didn't see anyone. But there was a shadow near the library door, just before. Poirot's eyes sharpened. A shadow. Mademoiselle. Describe it. Rose bit her lip. Tall, sir, in a coat or cloak. It moved quick-like, toward the servants' passage. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. As we left, I whispered, a cloaked figure. That could be anyone, Carver, Vance, even Stokes. Patience, Hastings, Poirot said. The shadow. It is a clue, but vague. We must build the mosaic, piece by piece. By noon, the household was under strain. Whispers of suspicion passing like a chill wind. Jap's men found no signs of an intruder on the grounds, deepening the sense that the killer was among us. Poirot, undeterred, requested a map of the house from Mrs. Penrose, studying its passages with intense focus. As we paused for tea, he murmured, the key, the sand, the manifest, these are not accidents. Someone in this house weaves a web, but Hercule Poirot shall untangle it. The day stretched on, heavy with the weight of murder, and I felt the eyes of Cliff Haven's inhabitants watching, waiting, as Poirot's little gray cells began their silent work. Chapter 4. The questions begin. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawns of Cliff Haven House, but inside, the atmosphere remained shrouded in gloom. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the weight of the investigation pressing upon us as Inspector Japp set up a makeshift office in the morning room, a sunlit space now dimmed by drawn curtains to preserve the gravity of the occasion. Poirot, with his notebook at the ready, had requested to sit in on the interviews, and Japp, ever pragmatic, had acquiesced. You've a way with these types, Poirot, he grunted. But no leading the witnesses, keep it straight. Poirot's response was a mild bow. Hercule Poirot does not lead, Inspector, he illuminates the truth. It emerges from the shadows of words and gestures. We began with Lady Beatrice Drayton, who entered the room with the poise of a queen, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fatigue. She seated herself opposite Japp, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Ask what you must, Inspector, she said coolly. This horror must be resolved. Japp cleared his throat. Lady Drayton, you said you were reading in your room at midnight. What book, if I may ask? A novel by Mrs. Christie, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, she replied without hesitation. I find detective stories diverting, though reality is far less tidy. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. Madam, your husband, did he mention any concerns about the golden statuette? Or perhaps about smuggling activities? Her lips tightened. Percival was excited about the unveiling. But yes, he'd heard the village rumors. He dismissed them as nonsense, though he did argue with Julian Carver yesterday afternoon about shipping matters. Percival suspected irregularities in the manifests and listed cargoes. That sort of thing. Jap made a note. And your relationship with Lord Drayton. All well. 25 years of marriage, Inspector. She said, her tone even. We had our differences, but nothing extraordinary. His passion for archaeology strained our finances, but we managed. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Differences, madam. Financial, perhaps, or something more personal. She hesitated, then sighed. Financial, mostly. And Percival had been distant lately, secretive. He spent evenings in the library, poring over those manifests. But murder, it's unthinkable. She was dismissed, and Clara entered next, her vivacity subdued, her hands twisting a handkerchief. I can't believe Uncle's gone, she murmured, seating herself. Jap was kinder with her. Miss Drayton, your alibi asleep until the scream. Anyone confirm that? My room is next to Aunt Beatrice's, she said. She heard me stir when the scream woke us both. Poirot smiled reassuringly. Mademoiselle, you mentioned your engagement to a London lawyer. Was Lord Drayton supportive? Clara flushed. Not entirely. Uncle thought Reginald, my fiancé, was too ambitious. But it was just his way. He'd come around. And the statuette, Poirot pressed. Did your uncle discuss its value with you? Or any threats? She shook her head. Only that it was priceless. But he did quarrel with Professor Vance yesterday, something about the artifact's authenticity. Uncle worried it might be a modern fake, tied to smuggling rings. Jap raised an eyebrow. A fake? Interesting. Thank you, Miss Drayton. Next was Julian Carver, Drayton's business partner, who entered with a forced nonchalance, lighting a cigarette with unsteady hands. Fire away, Inspector. I've nothing to hide. Your alibi, Mr. Carver. The billiard room. Alone? Jap asked. Yes, having a brandy. I heard the scream and ran out. Poirot interjected softly. Monsieur Carver, Lady Drayton mentioned an argument with Lord Drayton about shipping manifests, unlisted cargoes. Carver's cigarette paused mid-drag. Business matters. Percival was paranoid about losses, thought some crates were being diverted. I assured him it was clerical error, but he wouldn't let it go. And your finances? Poirot probed. The shipping firm, is it prosperous? Carver's eyes shifted. We've had setbacks, storms, competition. But murder? Absurd. Percival was my partner, my friend. As he left, Poirot murmured to me, observe. Hastings, his hands tremble. Fear. Or guilt. Mrs. Evelyn Marwood followed, fluttering in like a nervous bird, her handkerchief a constant companion. This is dreadful, she whimpered. Poor Percival. I heard the scream and thought it a nightmare. Jap nodded. Your alibi, Mrs. Marwood, in bed, light sleeper. Hear anything before the scream? Nothing, she said, then hesitated. Well, footsteps in the corridor, perhaps 10 minutes prior. Heavy, like a man's. Poirot's interest peaked. Footsteps, madam, toward the library. I think so, she admitted. But I paid no mind. Cliff Haven creaks like an old ship. And your connection to the family? Poirot asked kindly. As Lady Beatrice's cousin, you know their secrets, perhaps. She blushed. Beatrice confided in me. Percival's obsession strained them. And Clara's engagement worried him. He thought her fiancé had debts. Professor Mortimer Vance entered next, his white hair disheveled, his enthusiasm replaced by unease. A tragic loss, he said, adjusting his spectacles. Percival was my patron. Jap cut to the chase. Your alibi, studying notes in your room. Alone? Yes, Vance replied. Preparing for the unveiling, Poirot leaned in. Professor, Miss Drayton mentioned an argument with Lord Drayton about the statuette's authenticity. He doubted your findings. Vance stiffened. A minor disagreement. Percival was cautious, worried the piece might be smuggled recently, not ancient. I assured him my tests confirmed its age, but he insisted on further verification. And the value? Poirot asked. If fake, it would ruin your reputation. Non? Vance's face reddened. Nonsense. It's genuine, a Phoenician treasure, worth thousands. Reverend Thomas Hale was next, his Bible clutched like a shield. This is the work of divine retribution, he declared, seating himself stiffly. Japp sighed. Your alibi, Reverend, praying alone. As I said, Hale replied. My room overlooks the cliffs. I heard nothing until the scream. Poirot's tone was respectful. Monsieur Hale, you opposed the statuette's display vehemently. Did you confront Lord Drayton? I warned him after dinner, Hale admitted. Pagan idols invite calamity. He laughed it off. Called me superstitious. The servants came last. Mrs. Penrose was brisk. In the servants' quarters, as stated. No unusual sounds. Rose, trembling, repeated her story of the shadow. Tall, cloaked, it vanished into the passage. Stokes, last, was surly. In my room, like I said. Heard the scream, came running. Poirot fixed him with a gaze. Monsieur Stokes, you drive the Bentley. Have you transported any unusual cargoes lately? Unlisted crates, perhaps? Stokes' eyes narrowed. That's the master's business, not mine. With interviews concluded, Japp rubbed his chin. Everyone's got a story, but they're shaky. Motives aplenty: money, reputation, resentment. Poirot rose, pacing slowly. The mosaic forms. Inspector. The shadow. The footsteps. The manifest, they point to a web of secrets. Tonight, we watch. The killer. They may grow bold. As evening fell, tension mounted. Whispers of the smuggler's curse spread, and I caught Rose crossing herself. Poirot confided over tea. The questions, Hastings, they stir the pot. Now, we wait for the truth to rise. The house settled uneasily, but Poirot's method had begun its inexorable work, probing the hearts of those at Cliff Haven. Chapter 5. The red herring's second day at Cliff Haven House dawned with a mist that clung to the cliffs like a shroud, amplifying the sense of isolation within the gray stone walls. Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the weight of suspicion growing heavier, as if the very air carried the whispers of betrayal. The household moved with strained civility, their glances darting like minnows, each wary of the others. Breakfast was a tense affair, with only the clink of cutlery breaking the silence. Poirot, ever composed, sipped his tisane, his green eyes scanning the faces around the table. Lady Beatrice, rigid with grief. Clara, pale and withdrawn. Julian Carver, fidgeting with his napkin. Mrs. Marwood, murmuring nervously. Professor Vance, lost in thought. Reverend Hale, sternly silent. And the servants, moving like shadows. Inspector Japp, fortified by a strong cup of tea, announced his plan to search the house and grounds more thoroughly. We're looking for that golden statuette, he said gruffly. It wasn't in the library, and it's too valuable to ignore. Could be the motive, someone after the loot. I nodded, leaning toward Poirot. The statuette's absence is odd, isn't it? If it's as priceless as Vance claims, a thief might have killed Drayton for it. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. Hastings, you chase the obvious, as always. The statuette, it is a possibility, but the sand, the key, the manifest, these suggest a deeper game. The killer wishes us to focus on the treasure, to distract from the truth. Jap's men began their search, combing the library, bedrooms, and servants' quarters, while Poirot requested a private word with me in the conservatory, a glass-walled room overlooking the turbulent sea. "Hastings," he said, pacing with measured steps. "The interviews yesterday revealed much, but also little. Each alibi, it holds, yet each conceals. We must look for the red herrings, the clues meant to mislead." I frowned, puzzled. "Red herrings? You mean the sand by the window, or the talk of smugglers?" "Precisement," he replied, his eyes gleaming. "The sand, it screams of an outsider, yet no footprints outside. The smuggling tales, they inflame the imagination. But where is the evidence? And the golden statuette, its absence is too convenient. We must seek what is hidden in plain sight." Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the hall. Jap burst in, holding a crumpled piece of cloth, a man's handkerchief, stained with what looked like dried blood. "Found this in the shrubbery near the cliff path," he declared. "Initials JC embroidered on it. That's you, Mr. Carver, isn't it?" Carver, summoned from the drawing room, paled at the sight. "That's mine, yes. But I lost it days ago, must have dropped it on a walk." "I swear, I didn't." Jap's eyes narrowed. "Convenient, losing it near the murder scene. And you were in the billiard room, alone, at midnight. No one to vouch for you?" Carver's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "I told you. I heard the scream and came running. I didn't go near the library before that." Poirot interjected softly. "Monsieur Carver, this handkerchief, when did you last see it?" "Wednesday, I think," Carver stammered. "I was walking the cliffs with Clara. It could have fallen out then." Clara, overhearing from the doorway, nodded. "That's right, Inspector. I saw him drop it near the cave path. It's no proof of anything." Jap grunted, unconvinced, but tucked the handkerchief into an evidence bag. "We'll test it for blood." "You're not off the hook, Carver." As Carver retreated, visibly shaken, Poirot murmured to me, "A red herring, Hastings. The handkerchief. It is too perfect. Left to point the finger. The killer wishes us to chase Monsieur Carver. But why?" The day progressed with mounting tension. Jap's men found no trace of the golden statuette, but they did uncover a small locked chest in the attic. "Its key missing. Could be where Drayton kept the statuette," Jap mused. "That key you found. Poirot, any luck with it?" Poirot produced the tarnished key from his pocket, examining it anew. "It fits no lock in the library, but perhaps this chest. Let us try." We ascended to the attic, a dusty space cluttered with trunks and old furniture. The chest, iron-bound and weathered, stood in a corner. Poirot inserted the key, and it turned with a satisfying click. Inside was a velvet-lined case, empty. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "The statuette was here, but it has been taken." Yet the chest was locked, and the key was in the library. I scratched my head. So the killer took the statuette after the murder. But why leave the key behind? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "To confuse us, Hastings. The statuette's absence is meant to suggest robbery, but I suspect it is still in this house, hidden to fuel the smuggling narrative." Back downstairs, whispers of Carver's handkerchief spread, and suspicion fell heavily on him. At luncheon, Lady Beatrice barely spoke, her eyes cold when they met Carver's. Mrs. Marwood whispered to Clara about that dreadful man, and Reverend Hale muttered about greed leading to sin. Vance, meanwhile, seemed distracted, scribbling notes about the statuette's inscriptions. Poirot, undeterred by the growing hysteria, requested a private word with Rose in the kitchen. The maid was nervous, her hands twisting her apron. "Mademoiselle Rose," Poirot said gently. "The shadow you saw tall, cloaked. Did it carry anything? A bundle, perhaps?" Rose bit her lip. I think so, sir. Something small, wrapped in cloth. But it was so quick. I couldn't be sure." Poirot nodded. "And the scent, mademoiselle? Did you notice anything unusual?" She hesitated. "A whiff of tobacco, Sir Strong. Like the kind Mr. Carver smokes." I gasped. "That's damning, Poirot. The handkerchief. Now tobacco, it's got to be Carver." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Or it is meant to seem so, Hastings. The tobacco, it is common here, Carver, Stokes, even Vance smoke. The killer, they are clever, planting these clues to lead us astray." As evening approached, Japp pulled Poirot aside. "Carver's looking guilty as sin, Poirot. That handkerchief, his shaky alibi, and now Rose's tobacco scent. I'm half a mind to arrest him." "Patience, Inspector," Poirot cautioned. "The clues, they are too neat, like a trail of breadcrumbs for a trap. We must look beyond the obvious. Tonight, I shall observe the household at dinner. The guilty one. They will betray themselves in a glance, a word." Dinner was a strained affair, the specter of Carver's handkerchief looming large. He sat isolated, his face drawn, while Clara tried to defend him, earning a sharp look from Lady Beatrice. Mrs. Marwood prattled about village smugglers, and Hale warned of divine judgment. Poirot, silent, watched each face, his little grey cells no doubt cataloguing every nuance. As we retired, I whispered, "Carver's in deep, Poirot. If he's not the killer, someone's doing a jolly good job framing him." Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "The red herrings multiply, Hastings. The handkerchief, the tobacco, the missing statuette, they point to Carver. But they are too deliberate. The true killer watches, believing themselves safe." But Hercule Poirot sees through the fog. The night closed in, the sea roaring below, and I felt the net of suspicion tightening, with Poirot at its center, ready to unravel the lies. Chapter 6. The inconsistency of the tide. I must confess, my dear reader, that by the morning following Poirot's initial interviews, the atmosphere at Smuggler's Rest had grown as thick and oppressive as the fog rolling in from the Cornish coast. The estate, perched precariously on the cliffs overlooking the churning Atlantic, seemed to echo with unspoken accusations. Captain Silas Golding's body had been removed by the local constabulary the previous evening, just before the storm fully unleashed its fury. But the high winds and relentless rain had since cut us off from the mainland. The narrow causeway leading to the village was submerged under the tide, turning the house into an island of suspicion. No one could leave, and no further police assistance could arrive until the waters receded, perhaps not for another day. Poirot, ever the picture of composure, had risen early and requested that we all gather in the drawing-room after breakfast. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, found myself once again in the role of his unofficial assistant, though I dare say my contributions were more observational than analytical. Poirot's little grey cells, as he so fondly referred to them, were already at work, sifting through the details like a prospector panning for gold. And gold, it seemed, was at the heart of this grim affair. The captain, known in whispered circles as the Golden Smuggler for his rumored exploits during the war, ferrying illicit treasures across the channel, had been found at the base of The cliffs the night before last. His body battered against the rocks by the incoming tide. At first glance, it appeared a tragic accident, a slip in the darkness, perhaps fueled by one too many brandies after dinner. But Poirot had dismissed that notion almost immediately upon his arrival. Non, mon ami, he had said to me privately, his green eyes gleaming with that familiar intensity. The captain was a man of the sea. He knew these cliffs as a lover knows his beloved's face. And see here, the contusions on the skull suggest a blow before the fall. Murder, Hastings, disguised as misfortune. The suspects our unwilling circle were assembled. The nephew, young Arthur Golding, no relation to me, thank heavens. Though the shared surname had caused some awkward confusion. A nervous fellow in his 30s with a penchant for pacing. His aunt by marriage, Lady Beatrice Golding, the captain's much younger wife, whose porcelain beauty hid a steely reserve, Mr. Reginald Vickers, the captain's business partner in some vague import-export venture, a burly man with a perpetual scowl, Dr. Elias Hale, the local physician who had pronounced the death, and who now sat fiddling with his spectacles. The vicar, Reverend Thomas Ellis, whose pious demeanor seemed strained by the weight of unspoken sins. And the maid, Miss Gwen Evans, a sharp-eyed Welshwoman in her 40s who moved about the room with the efficiency of a shadow. Poirot positioned himself by the fireplace, his small, neat figure immaculate in a tailored suit despite the damp chill seeping through the windows. He stroked his magnificent mustache, a sure sign that his mind was engaged, and addressed us with that precise, accented English that brooked no interruption. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice soft yet commanding, we find ourselves in a most unfortunate predicament. The tide, she rises and falls with the predictability of the moon. Yet human nature is far less reliable. Captain Golding's death was no accident of nature. It was the work of a human hand, guided by motive and opportunity. I have spoken with each of you, and now I wish to clarify certain details. He turned first to young Arthur Golding, who stopped his pacing and flushed under the scrutiny. Monsieur Golding, you stated that after dinner on the night of the tragedy, you retired to the library at precisely 9 o'clock to review some estate papers. You heard nothing unusual until the alarm was raised at 10:30, when Miss Evans discovered the body from the cliff-top path. Arthur nodded vigorously. Yes, that's right. I was buried in those dusty ledgers. Uncle Silas's accounts were a mess. What with his adventures, Poirot inclined his head. And you, Lady Beatrice? You claim to have been in your boudoir from 8:30 onward, nursing a headache with a tisane prepared by Miss Evans. Lady Beatrice, seated on the chaise longue with her hands folded primly in her lap, met his gaze steadily. Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, the storm was brewing even then, and my nerves were frayed. I heard the wind howling but nothing more. One by one, Poirot revisited their alibis, his questions probing like a surgeon's scalpel. Mr. Vickers had been in the billiard room, smoking a cigar and nursing a grudge over a recent financial disagreement with the captain. The vicar had retreated to the conservatory to meditate on his sermon. Dr. Hale insisted he had stepped out for a brief walk along the upper path before the rain intensified, returning by 9:15. Miss Evans, ever dutiful, had been in the kitchen clearing the dinner service until she took her customary evening stroll along the cliff edge, where she spotted the captain's crumpled form below. It was during Dr. Hale's recounting that I noticed Poirot's eyes narrow ever so slightly, a telltale sign that something had caught his attention. The doctor, a man of middle age with a scholarly air and a habit of adjusting his cufflinks when speaking, repeated his timeline with confidence. I returned to the house at 9:15, as I said. The tide was just beginning to turn, lapping at the rocks below. I went straight to my room to change out of my damp coat. Poirot paused, his finger tapping lightly on the mantelpiece. The tide, you say, Doctor? An interesting observation. Tell me, how did you know the tide was turning at that precise moment? From the upper path, one cannot see the water's edge clearly, especially in the gathering dusk and with the clouds obscuring the moon. Dr. Hale blinked, his hand pausing mid-adjustment on his cufflink. Well, I could hear it, of course. The waves crashing louder, the pull of the water. As a local man, I'm attuned to such things. Attuned? Yes, Poirot murmured. But there was a note of skepticism in his voice that only I, familiar with his methods, could detect. He turned away abruptly, as if the matter were trivial, and addressed Miss Evans. Mademoiselle, you discovered the body at 10:30. You say you ventured out despite the threatening weather because it is your habit to take the air before retiring. Brave, non, and from the cliff top, you saw the captain's body on the rocks below. Illuminated by what? A flash of lightning? Perhaps. Miss Evans, her face pale and set, nodded. Sir. The storm was flashing intermittent-like. I saw his coat, the red one he always wore for evenings, splayed out on the wet stones. I screamed and ran back to fetch the others. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. And the body was partially submerged, the waves washing over it. Yes, the tide had come in by then, tugging at him. I watched as Poirot paced slowly to the window, gazing out at the roiling sea. The rain lashed against the panes, and thunder rumbled in the distance. He seemed lost in contemplation, but I knew better. This was the moment when his mind assembled the puzzle pieces. Suddenly, he whirled back to face the room. But here is the inconsistency that troubles Hercule Poirot. The tide. Ms. Amicet is a creature of precision, governed by the laws of nature. I have consulted the local almanac this very morning. He produced a small, dog-eared booklet from his pocket with a flourish. According to this, on the night in question, high tide was not due until 11 o'clock. At 10:30, the water should have been several feet below the rocks where the body lay. Yet Miss Evans describes the waves tugging at the captain, and Dr. Hale speaks of the tide turning at 9:15, a full hour and 45 minutes early. A murmur rippled through the room. Young Arthur leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But what does that mean? Poirot's eyes sparkled. It means, mon cher, that either the almanac is wrong, which it is not, for it is published by the Admiralty itself, or someone is mistaken about the time, or, perhaps, not mistaken, but deliberately misleading. Dr. Hale shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Surely, Monsieur Poirot, the tide can vary with the wind. The storm, non. Poirot cut him off with a raised hand. The variation is minimal. A matter of minutes, not hours. No, this detail it is like a thread pulled loose from a tapestry. Pull it, and the whole picture unravels. He approached the doctor slowly, his gaze unwavering. You, Doctor, mentioned hearing the tide turn at 9:15. But to hear such a thing precisely, one would need to be closer to the water's edge, perhaps down on the beach itself, or near the base of the cliffs. Yet you claim to have been on the upper path. Hale's face paled, and he adjusted his spectacles with a trembling hand. I must have misremembered. The wind was howling, sounds carry strangely. Poirot smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. Misremembered? Or perhaps you were indeed near the water at the very spot where Captain Golding met his doom. A blow to the head, a push over the edge, and then Ah, but the body would not yet be washed by the waves, unless one waited, ensuring the scene appeared as an accident claimed by the sea. The room fell silent, save for the patter of rain. Lady Beatrice gasped softly, her hand to her mouth. Vickers grunted in surprise, and the vicar murmured a prayer. I felt a thrill of excitement. This was Poirot at his finest, spotting the anomaly that others overlooked. But he was not finished. And there's more. The captain's watch, smashed in the fall, stopped at 9:25. If he fell then, the tide was low yet by the time Miss Evans discovered him at 10:30. The water had risen enough to partially submerge him, as described. But wait, Miss Evans. You said the body was tugged by the waves. At 10:30, high tide still 40 minutes away. That should not be so, unless the body had been there longer, and the discovery timed to fit the alibis. Miss Evans's eyes darted to the door, her composure cracking for the first time. I don't know what you mean. Poirot chuckled softly. Ah, but I think you do. The gesture, the word, the time they betray you. And now we dig deeper into the secrets of the golden smuggler. For gold, it seems, lures not only smugglers, but murderers. As the implications sank in, I could sense the tension coiling tighter. Poirot had uncovered a chink in the armor of lies, but the full truth remained hidden, like buried treasure beneath the sands. The storm outside raged on, mirroring the turmoil within, and I wondered what further revelations the day would bring. Chapter 7. The Shadows of Hidden Gold. The revelation about the tide had cast a pall over Smuggler's Rest that no amount of afternoon tea could dispel. As the storm continued to batter the Cornish coast, confining us all within the estate's stone walls, I observed Poirot with a mixture of admiration and impatience. He had exposed a glaring inconsistency in the alibis of Dr. Hale and Miss Evans. Yet he did not press the matter further in that fraught gathering. Instead, he dismissed us with a polite bow, suggesting we retire to our rooms to reflect upon the truths that hide in the shadows. It was his way, of course, to let the suspects stew in their own anxieties, allowing the pressure to build until lies cracked like eggshells underfoot. I followed him to the library, where he had commandeered a corner table strewn with notes, the Admiralty Almanac, and a sketch he had made of the cliffside pots. The room smelled of old leather and sea salt, the bookshelves groaning under volumes of nautical lore and faded maps, remnants, no doubt, of Captain Golding's adventurous past. Poirot settled into an armchair, his small hands steepled before him, and fixed me with that penetrating gaze. Hastings, mon ami, he said, his voice a murmur against the howl of the wind outside. You are puzzled, non? You wonder why Poirot does not pounce like the cat upon the mouse. I nodded, perching on the edge of a nearby chair. Indeed, Poirot. Dr. Hale's story unravels at the seams, and Miss Evans, her discovery seems to conveniently timed. Why not confront them outright? He chuckled softly, twisting the ends of his mustache. Ah, but confrontation at this stage would yield only more denials, more fabrications. No, we must peel away the layers gently, like removing the skin from an onion, lest the tears obscure our vision. The motive, Hastings, it is the key. Gold, smuggling, secrets of the war. These are not mere backdrops. They are the threads that bind our suspects. As if on cue, a knock sounded at the door. It was young Arthur Golding, his face drawn and pale, glancing nervously over his shoulder before entering. Monsieur Poirot, he began, closing the door behind him. I couldn't bear it any longer. After what you said about the tide, I fear I must speak. There are things, family matters, that I withheld yesterday. Poirot gestured for him to sit, his expression one of benevolent interest. Proceed, monsieur. The truth. She is a balm for the troubled soul. Arthur sank into a chair, his hands clasped tightly. Uncle Silas wasn't just a sea captain, he was a smuggler, as the whispers say. During the war, he ran gold bars of it, melted down from looted treasures across the Channel. He claimed it was for the Allies, but I suspect much of it lined his own pockets. After the armistice, he hid a fortune somewhere on the estate. I've searched for years, but nothing. Lately, though, he argued fiercely with Vickers about it. Vickers invested in Uncle's ventures, expecting a share, but Uncle refused, saying the gold was cursed. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Cursed. An interesting choice of word. And you, Monsieur Arthur, did you not covet this gold yourself? As the heir, perhaps? Arthur flushed. I won't deny it. The estate is mortgaged to the hilt. Uncle's extravagances saw to that. But I didn't kill him. I was in this very library, as I said, poring over the accounts. They showed debts, massive ones, to Vickers, among others. He produced a crumpled ledger from his pocket, handing it to Poirot. I leaned over as Poirot flipped through the pages, his finger tracing columns of figures. See here, Arthur continued. Entries for Channel consignments, coded, but obvious. And look, a recent withdrawal. £5,000, just days before his death. To whom? I don't know. Poirot closed the ledger with a snap. Most illuminating. And Lady Beatrice. She shares in these financial woes. Arthur hesitated, his gaze dropping. Aunt Beatrice, she's not what she seems. Uncle married her hastily, 5 years ago, after meeting her in London. She's from a good family, but penniless. There were rumors of an affair before the wedding with Dr. Hale, of all people. He's been the family physician since then, always hovering. I overheard them once, in the garden, speaking in low tones about old times and debts unpaid. I raised an eyebrow, shocked by the implication. Poirot, however, merely nodded. Affairs of the heart, they often intertwine with those of the purse. Merci, Monsieur Arthur. You have been most forthcoming. As Arthur departed, looking somewhat relieved, Poirot turned to me. The plot thickens, Hastings. Financial motives abound, and now a hidden affair. But we must verify. Our next visitor arrived unbidden. Mr. Reginald Vickers, bursting into the library with the force of a gale. His burly frame filled the doorway, his scowl deeper than ever. Poirot, I've had enough of this cat-and-mouse game. You think I pushed the old fool over the cliff for his gold? Well, damn it. You're half right, I wanted my share. But I didn't kill him. Poirot regarded him calmly. Then enlighten us, monsieur. Vickers, what is this share you speak of? Vickers paced the room, his boots thudding on the carpet. Golding and I partnered in the war, smuggling gold out of France, selling it on the black market. We buried a cache here, on the estate, to avoid the taxman. But after the war, he claimed it was lost in a storm. Lies. He dug it up himself, hid it elsewhere. We quarreled that night. After dinner, I accused him outright in the billiard room. He laughed, said I'd never find it. I stormed out, but I didn't follow him to the cliffs. And your alibi? Poirot pressed. You remained in the billiard room until the alarm? Vickers grunted. I smoking and fuming. But asked the vicar. He poked his head in around 9:30, mumbling about sin and redemption. Bloody hypocrite. Poirot's interest sharpened. The Reverend Ellis. What sin did he reference? Vickers shrugged. Something about greed being the root of evil. He knew about the gold. Golding confessed it to him once. In a drunken fit, Ellis has been pressing for donations to the church roof fund. Bitter feud there. Golding called him a sanctimonious beggar. As Vickers left, grumbling under his breath, I turned to Poirot. Good heavens, Poirot. Everyone seems entangled in this web of gold and grudges. Precisement, he replied. But observe, each revelation points to another. Now, let us summon Lady Beatrice. The heart of a woman it often holds the deepest secrets. Lady Beatrice arrived shortly, her composure a fragile veneer. She seated herself gracefully, but her hands betrayed her, twisting a lace handkerchief. Monsieur Poirot, I sense you wish to probe further. Very well. Ask your questions. Poirot leaned forward, his tone gentle yet insistent. Madam, your marriage to the captain, was it one of love or necessity? She stiffened. Love. Perhaps at first. Silas was charming, adventurous. But necessity? Yes. My family lost everything in the crash of '29. He offered security, but his secrets, the smuggling, they poisoned us. He grew paranoid, accusing me of indiscretions. With Dr. Hale, perhaps, Poirot suggested softly. Her eyes flashed. How dare! Elias and I were friends, long before. Childhood companions. But Silas's jealousy, it led to terrible rows. The night he died, we argued in the drawing room after dinner. He claimed I'd been meeting Elias in secret, plotting to steal his gold. Absurd. I retired to my room in tears. And the tisane Miss Evans prepared, did it calm you? She nodded. Gwen is loyal. She's been with the family for years. But, I confess, I didn't drink it immediately. I slipped out briefly, around 9, to the conservatory for air. I saw the vicar there, praying fervently. He looked startled, as if caught in some private torment. Poirot pounced. The conservatory at 9? Yet Reverend Ellis claims he was there from 8 onward, meditating undisturbed. Lady Beatrice frowned. Undisturbed? No, he was muttering about forgiveness for past sins. When he saw me, he composed himself quickly. As she departed, Poirot rubbed his hands together. The lies surfaced like bubbles in a pot about to boil. The vicar, too, conceals something. We did not have long to wait. Reverend Ellis, summoned next, entered with a pious air that did little to mask his unease. His thin face was etched with lines of worry, and he clutched a worn Bible as if it were a shield. Monsieur Poirot, he intoned, I come in the spirit of truth. The Lord's light reveals all. Indeed, Poirot said dryly. Then reveal. Reverend, what sin weighs upon you? Mr. Vickers speaks of greed. Lady Beatrice of muttered prayers for forgiveness. Ellis sighed deeply, sinking into the chair. Captain, Golding's gold, it is a temptation from the devil himself. Years ago, during the war, I aided him once, hid a shipment in the church crypt for safekeeping. He promised a tithe to the parish, but reneged. We've feuded ever since. That night, I confronted him in the conservatory after dinner. He mocked my faith, said the gold was his alone. I left in anger, but I swear, I did not harm him. And the time? Poirot queried. Round 8:45. I remained, praying for his soul and mine until nearly 10. But Lady Beatrice saw you at 9, disturbed. And Vickers claims you visited the billiard room at 9:30. Ellis paled. I may have stepped out briefly, to clear my head. The paths were dark. I wandered near the cliffs but turned back. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Near the cliffs, Reverend? At a time when the captain might have been there. It was innocent. I heard nothing, saw nothing. As Ellis exited, looking shaken, Poirot turned to me. The feuds, the affairs, the financial desperations, they all converge. But one more. Miss Evans. The maid was last, entering with a tray of tea unasked to ploy. Perhaps, to steady her nerves. Sir, she said in her lilting Welsh accent, I've not to hide. I served the captain faithfully. Poirot accepted a cup, sipping delicately. Yet you discovered the body at a time when the tide should not have reached it. And the tizzen for Lady Beatrice, did it contain anything unusual? Her eyes widened. No, just chamomile. But, there's more. The captain, he trusted me with his secrets. That gold, he showed me where he hid it, in a cave below the cliffs, accessible only at low tide. He planned to move it that night, fearing thieves. I begged him not to go out in the storm, but he insisted. After clearing dinner, I followed at a distance, worried. I saw him on the path, arguing with someone, shadowy figure. Couldn't see who. Then a scuffle, and he fell. I panicked, waited till the tide rose to make it look accidental, then raised the alarm. Poirot set down his cup. The partial truth emerges. But who was the figure? I swear, I don't know. It was too dark. As she left, tears in her eyes, Poirot leaned back. Lies upon lies. Hastings. Affairs with Hale. Feuds with Ellis and Vickers. Financial ruin for Arthur and Beatrice. And the gold hidden in a cave, accessible at low tide. That explains the timing. The murder occurred when the water was low. The body left to be claimed by the sea later. I shivered, the pieces swirling in my mind. But who? Poirot. Who struck the blow? He smiled enigmatically. Patience. Mon ami. The emotional cracks widen. Soon, someone will break entirely. Outside, the storm began to abate. But within Smugglers' Rest, the tempest of secrets raged on. I could only wonder what further depths we would plumb before the truth surfaced. Chapter 8. The crack in the Facadath storm had begun to relent by late afternoon, its ferocity giving way to a sullen drizzle that draped Smuggler's Rest in a shroud of gray. The sea beyond the cliffs churned restlessly, as if mirroring the unease that gripped the household. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, each glance between the occupants laden with unspoken accusations. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon me. But Poirot remained a beacon of calm precision, his mind a whirl of calculations as he prepared to tighten the screws on our circle of suspects after Miss Evans's startling admission about witnessing a shadowy figure on the cliff path. Poirot had retreated to the library to ponder, his small notebook now filled with cryptic jottings and a meticulously drawn timeline of the fatal night. I joined him there, finding him seated at the table, a cup of tisane untouched. I noted before him. His green eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity that signaled a breakthrough was near. Hastings, he said, without looking up from his notes. The human heart. It is a fragile thing. Under pressure, it cracks, revealing what lies beneath. Today, we shall apply such pressure. And someone, I think, will break. I frowned, glancing at the rain-streaked window. You mean to confront them again? But Miss Evans already confessed to tampering with the scene. But her confession is incomplete, Poirot replied, tapping his pencil against the page. She protects someone or fears someone. The figure she saw, the argument on the path that is the pivot of this crime. And the gold, mon ami. It is the magnet that draws all motives together. We must shake the tree and see what falls. He rose abruptly, summoning the household to the drawing room once more. As we gathered, the atmosphere was markedly different from the previous meeting. Where before there had been guarded politeness, now there was raw tension. Young Arthur Golding sat rigid, his eyes darting to his aunt, Lady Beatrice, who maintained her composure but clutched her handkerchief tightly. Mr. Vickers stood by the window, his broad shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. Dr. Hale adjusted his spectacles incessantly, a nervous tic that betrayed his unease. Reverend Ellis clutched his Bible, his lips moving silently, while Miss Evans lingered near the door, her face pale but resolute. Poirot positioned himself at the center of the room, his small stature commanding attention as surely as a general on a battlefield. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft yet piercing, "we approach the heart of this tragedy. Captain Silas Golding, the Golden Smuggler, was struck down not by the sea but by a human hand. His gold, hidden in a cave below the cliffs, was the prize that fueled this act. Each of you has a secret tied to this gold or to the man who hoarded it. Now, let us lay bare these secrets." He turned first to Lady Beatrice, his gaze steady. "Madam, you spoke of an argument with your husband on the night of his death, over accusations of infidelity with Dr. Hale. Yet you omitted a detail. You followed him out of the house, did you not? To the cliff path, perhaps, to continue your quarrel?" Lady Beatrice's eyes widened, her composure faltering. I did no such thing. I went to the conservatory, as I said, and saw the vicar there. Yet the vicar's account conflicts." Poirot countered smoothly. "He claims to have been undisturbed until nearly 10, yet you saw him muttering at 9. And Miss Evans' her discovery of the body at 10:30 suggests a delay. Why, madam, did you not mention seeing your husband leave the house?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the handkerchief into knots. Because I feared it would look suspicious. Yes, I saw Silas storm out after our row, round 8:30. He was in a foul temper, muttering about the gold and betrayal. I thought he needed air, so I didn't follow. I swear it." Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but I knew he was merely setting the stage. He turned to Dr. Hale. "Doctor, your timeline is most curious. You claim to have walked the upper path at 9:15, hearing the tide turn. Yet, as we established, the tide could not have been so advanced at that hour. Were you, perhaps, closer to the water near the cave where the gold is hidden?" Hale's face flushed, his cufflinks forgotten as he gripped the arms of his chair. "This is preposterous. I was on the upper path, as I said. The wind, the storm, it distorted sounds. I had no business at the cave. And yet," Poirot continued, unrelenting, "you and Lady Beatrice share a history, non? A romantic attachment before her marriage. Did Captain Golding's accusations rekindle old resentments? Or perhaps a desire to secure the gold for yourselves?" Hale shot to his feet, his voice trembling with indignation. "How dare you, sir? Beatrice and I were friends, nothing more. I examined the captain's body out of duty, not guilt." "Sit, doctor," Poirot said calmly. "The truth does not hide behind raised voices." As Hale sank back, glowering, Poirot turned to Vickers. "Monsieur Vickers, you admitted to a quarrel with the captain over the gold. You left the billiard room in anger. Did you follow him to the cliffs, seeking to force the location of the cash?" Vickers crossed his arms, his scowl deepening. "I told you. I stayed in the house, smoking. The vicar saw me at 9:30. I'm no fool to chase a man in a storm." Yet the vicar's movements are also unclear. Poirot said, pivoting to Reverend Ellis. You, monsieur, speak of praying in the conservatory. Yet Lady Beatrice found you distressed at 9, and you admit to wandering near the cliffs later, seeking what? Redemption? Or the gold you once hid for the captain? Ellis's hands tightened on his Bible, his voice low. I sought only to clear my conscience. The captain's greed corrupted you as all. I wandered, yes, but I harmed no one. Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. And you, Miss Evans, he said, turning to the maid, you saw a figure arguing with the captain, yet claim ignorance of their identity. A loyal servant, perhaps protecting a master or mistress? Miss Evans's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. I've told you all I know, sir. I saw the captain fall, but the figure was a shadow in the storm. I waited, yes, to make it look accidental, but only to protect the household's name. The room fell silent, the only sound the patter of rain against the windows. Then, to my astonishment, Lady Beatrice let out a choked sob, her facade crumbling. Enough, she cried, rising from her seat. I can't bear it any longer. Silas was a tyrant, a hoarder of secrets and gold. Yes, I followed him that night not to kill him, but to plead with him to share the wealth, to save us from ruin. I saw him on the path, arguing with someone. Dr. Hale. Hale gasped, his face ashen. Beatrice, no, that's a lie. She whirled on him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Don't deny it, Elias. I saw you, heard you shouting about the gold, how he'd cheated you out of your share years ago. You were on the lower path, near the cave. Then I heard a cry, and I ran back to the house, terrified. The room erupted in chaos. Hale shouting denials, Vickers swearing, Arthur staring in shock, and Ellis murmuring prayers. Only Poirot remained unmoved, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Merci, madam, he said quietly. The crack, it widens, but we are not yet at the truth's core. He raised a hand for silence. Lady Beatrice, you have revealed a partial truth, but your story, too, has gaps. Why run back without raising the alarm? And Dr. Hale, if you were not on the lower path, why does your timeline falter? Non, do not answer now. Reflect, all of you, for tomorrow we gather again, and the full truth will emerge. As the group dispersed, their faces a mix of fear and defiance, I turned to Poirot. Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it. Beatrice's confession changes everything. Hale's the man, surely. He shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. Not so fast. Hastings. The heart breaks, yes, but the mind deceives. Lady Beatrice accuses Hale, yet her own actions are suspect. And Miss Evans, her silence, protects more than the household's honor. We are close, mon ami, but one piece remains missing. As we retired to our rooms, the drizzle outside gave way to a tentative clearing, the first stars piercing the sky. But within Smuggler's Rest, the storm of emotions had reached its peak, and I knew Poirot was poised to deliver the final blow. Chapter 9. The psychological net. 10th morning following Lady Beatrice's emotional outburst. Dawn clear and crisp. The storm's remnants swept away by a brisk sea breeze that carried the tang of salt and kelp up from the cliffs. Smuggler's Rest, no longer isolated by the flooded causeway, seemed almost idyllic in the sunlight, its stone facade gleaming as if washed clean of the previous day's sins. Yet, within its walls, the shadows of deceit lingered, and I sensed that Hercule Poirot was ready to cast his net, drawing the guilty party into a trap of their own making. Poirot had risen early, as was his habit, and I found him in the library, meticulously arranging his notes and the Admiralty Almanac, alongside a rough map of the estate's paths and the hidden cave below. He had even sketched a timeline on a sheet of foolscap, marking each suspect's claimed movements with precise notations. "Hastings," he greeted me, his voice infused with that quiet excitement I knew so well. "Today, we set the trap. The psychology. It is the finest weapon. We shall gather them once more and apply the pressure not with force, but with the subtle art of suggestion. The guilty one will reveal themselves through a slip, a gesture, a contradiction too far." I nodded, though I confess I was eager for resolution. Lady Beatrice's accusation against Dr. Hale had thrown suspicion squarely upon him. Yet Poirot's cautionary words the night before lingered in my mind. But surely, Poirot, Hale's the culprit. The affair, the grudge over the gold. It all fits. He wagged a finger admonishingly. "Ah, mon ami, the pieces fit too neatly, like a puzzle assembled by the hand of the murderer themselves. Non, we must probe deeper. Observe the reactions. The trap is baited with half-truths and implications." By midday, Poirot summoned the household to the drawing room for what he termed a final clarification. Before the authorities arrive, the local constable had telephoned earlier, confirming the causeway was passable and that Inspector Japp Poirot's old acquaintance from Scotland Yard would be en route by afternoon train. This news added an undercurrent of urgency, heightening the tension as we assembled. The suspects filed in, their faces a study in varied unease. Young Arthur Golding appeared haggard, as if he had not slept, his eyes shadowed by the weight of inheritance tainted by murder. Lady Beatrice, composed once more in a simple day dress, avoided Dr. Hale's gaze, her accusation hanging unspoken between them. Hale himself was pale and agitated, his spectacles slipping down his nose as he fidgeted with his cufflinks. Mr. Vickers lounged against the mantelpiece, arms crossed, but his usual scowl masked a flicker of apprehension. Reverend Ellis sat primly, Bible in hand, though his knuckles were white from gripping it too tightly. Miss Evans hovered at the periphery, her sharp eyes darting from one to another, as if gauging the room's shifting alliances. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his posture impeccable, hands clasped behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs," he intoned, his accent lending a formal gravity to the proceedings. "We stand on the precipice of truth. Captain Golding's death was no accident. It was murder, motivated by the allure of hidden gold and festering secrets. Each of you has confessed fragmented quarrels, affairs, financial desperations, but the whole remains obscured. Today, I propose a reconstruction, a little drama to illuminate the shadows." A murmur rippled through the room. Vickers snorted. "A drama? This isn't a theater, Poirot. Get on with it." Poirot smiled thinly. "But life, monsieur, is the greatest stage. Let us begin with the night in question." Dinner concluded at 8 o'clock. Captain Golding, fueled by brandy and paranoia, argued with several of you, with Lady Beatrice over fidelity, with Vickers over shares, with Ellis over broken promises. He then announced his intention to secure his legacy. Code, I believe, for checking the gold in the cave, accessible only at low tide, which was ebbing around 8:30. He paused, his eyes scanning the faces. The captain exited the house. Shortly thereafter, someone followed Dorley in wait. Miss Evans, loyal as she is, trailed him out of concern and witnessed an argument on the cliff path, culminating in a fatal blow and push. She delayed raising the alarm to allow the tide to rise, masking the crime as an accident. But who was the shadowy figure? Lady Beatrice stirred. As I said, it was Dr. Hale. I saw them quarreling near the lower path. Hale leaped to his feet. Lies. Beatrice. Why turn on me? I was on the upper path. As I stated, I heard nothing, saw nothing. Poirot raised a hand. Calm, Doctor. Let us test this. Suppose we reenact the movements. Monsieur Arthur, you were in the library from 9 onward. Yet the ledger you showed me, its ink was fresh on certain entries. Did you alter them that night? Perhaps to hide your own debts. Arthur flushed. I was reviewing them. Yes. But I didn't leave the room. Non. A side door leads to the garden path. A quick exit. A confrontation over inheritance. Poirot let the implication hang. Watching Arthur's face drain of color, turning to Vickers, Poirot continued. You, monsieur, stormed from the billiard room after your quarrel. The vicar claims to have seen you at 9:30, but perhaps he covers for you or you for him. Reverend, your wanderings near the cliffs, seeking the gold you once hid. A moment of temptation, a shove in righteous anger. Ellis shook his head vehemently. I am a man of God. I prayed for guidance. Nothing more. Poirot's gaze shifted to Miss Evans. And you, Mademoiselle, your loyalty to the family is admirable. But does it extend to complicity? You knew the cave's location. Perhaps you argued with the captain over a promised share, a reward for years of service denied. Miss Evans's lips trembled. No, sir. I followed to protect him. The figure, it was tall, like a man. Ah, Poirot murmured. Tall like Dr. Hale, or Vickers, or even young Arthur. Or perhaps not a man at all. Shadows deceive in storms. He paced slowly, building the pressure. Consider the watch, smashed at 9-20-5. The blow came then, when the tide was low. The body lay exposed until the water rose. Lady Beatrice, you claim to have seen Hale with the captain. Yet why flee without aid? Unless you were involved, perhaps striking the blow yourself, in a fit of rage over years of tyranny, then recruiting Hale to help conceal it. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. How dare you? I loved Silas once. I wouldn't. Or, Poirot interjected, turning to Hale, you, Doctor, with your medical knowledge, could have administered a sedative in the brandy earlier, making the captain unsteady, easy to overpower. Your affair with Lady Beatrice denied, but evident, in glances provided motive. She accuses you now to deflect suspicion, but perhaps you acted together. Hale's face contorted. This is madness. Beatrice, tell them we were friends, nothing more. I walked the upper path to clear my head after dinner. The tide, I misheard it. That's all. Poirot nodded sagely. Misheard? Or were you below, retrieving gold after the deed? The cave let us speak of it. This morning, with the tide low, I ventured down. The gold is gone, removed recently. Footprints in the sand. Several sets, overlapping. Someone knew, someone took it post-murder. The room tensed further. Vickers straightened. Gone? Then the killer has it. Precisement, Poirot said. And now, the trap. I have informed Inspector Japp of a crucial clue, a blood-stained cufflink found near the cliff edge. He produced a small, gleaming object from his pocket, holding it aloft. It was a simple gold cufflink, engraved with initials. E.H. Hale blanched. That's mine. But I lost it weeks ago. Anyone could have planted it. Indeed. Poirot agreed mildly. Or dropped it in the struggle. Japp will test for blood. Meanwhile, reflect. The guilty party knows the cufflink is a bluff, for no such item was found. but panic may betray them. Silence fell, heavy as the fog. Eyes darted suspiciously, Arthur to Beatrice, Vickers to Ellis, Hale to Evans. Miss Evans wrung her hands, murmuring, "It wasn't supposed to end like this." Poirot watched keenly, his little gray cells attuned to every nuance. The net tightens. Amos. By evening, the truth will snare its prey. As the group dispersed, uneasy and whispering, I marveled at Poirot's ingenuity. The cufflink of fabrication, I realized, was the perfect bait. Brilliant, Poirot. Whoever reacts strongest is our man or woman. He chuckled. We, Hastings. Now, we wait for the mouse to nibble. The afternoon stretched taut with anticipation, the sun casting long shadows across the lawns. Little did I know how swiftly the trap would spring. Chapter 10. The unveiling of the truth. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Smuggler's Rest, casting golden bars across the drawing-room floor. Yet the warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion that hung over the gathering. Hercule Poirot had orchestrated this final assembly with the precision of a conductor, and I, Captain Arthur Hastings, could sense the climax approaching. Inspector Japp had arrived from the village, his bluff presence adding a new layer of authority to the proceedings. Though he deferred to Poirot with a grudging respect I had seen many times before, the suspects, summoned once more, filed in with faces drawn and eyes wary, each aware that the net Poirot had cast was about to close. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small figure immaculate in a charcoal suit, his mustache gleaming as if polished for the occasion. Inspector Japp stood to one side, notebook in hand, while I took my usual place near Poirot, ready to observe the unraveling of the mystery. The room was silent save for the distant murmur of the sea, now calm after the storm's fury. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. We have reached the moment of truth. Captain Silas Golding, the Golden Smuggler, was murdered not by chance but by design, struck down on the cliff path and pushed to the rocks below. The gold he hoarded, hidden in a cave, was the catalyst, but human passions, greed, jealousy, betrayal wove the noose. Today, Hercule Poirot will reveal the killer, step by step, using the little gray cells to illuminate what the heart conceals. He paused, letting his words sink in. Lady Beatrice sat rigidly, her eyes fixed on the floor. Dr. Hale's hands trembled as he adjusted his spectacles. Young Arthur Golding gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. Mr. Vickers stood, with his usual scowl, but his posture betrayed unease. Reverend Ellis clutched his Bible, lips moving silently, while Miss Evans stood near the door, her face pale but composed. Let us reconstruct, Poirot continued, pacing slowly. Dinner ended. At 8, Captain Golding, agitated by quarrels, announced his intention to secure his legacy. He meant the gold in the cave, accessible at low tide, which began ebbing around 8:30. He left the house shortly after, followed by someone or met by someone waiting on the path. At 9:25, his watch stopped, marking the moment of the fatal blow. The body lay on the rocks until Miss Evans, claiming to protect the household, delayed raising the alarm until 10:30, when the rising tide made the death appear accidental. He turned to Miss Evans, his gaze piercing. Mademoiselle, you saw a figure arguing with the captain. You claim it was too dark to identify them, yet you waited, allowing the tide to mask the crime. Why? Miss Evans's voice quavered. I told you, sir, to protect the family's name. The captain was dead. I couldn't bring him back. Non, Poirot said sharply. You protected someone specific. Your loyalty is not to the family, but to one person within it. Her eyes widened, but she said nothing, her hands twisting together. Poirot pivoted to Dr. Hale. Doctor, your timeline is a house of cards. You claim to have walked the upper path at 9:15, hearing the tide turn a physical impossibility. As the tide was low, were you on the lower path, near the cave, confronting the captain over past betrayals or the gold he owed you? Hale's face flushed. I've said it 100 times, I was on the upper path. Beatrice's accusation is a lie, born of spite. Poirot mused, turning to Lady Beatrice. Madam, you admitted following your husband, witnessing him argue with Dr. Hale. Yet you fled without raising the alarm. Why? Fear or complicity? Lady Beatrice's composure cracked, her voice rising. I was terrified. I saw Elias with Silas, heard shouts about the gold, then a cry. I ran back to the house, afraid of what I'd seen. Poirot nodded, then addressed Vickers. Monsieur Vickers, your quarrel with the captain was fierce. You sought your share of the gold. Did you follow him to the cliffs, demanding answers? Vickers growled. I stayed in the billiard room. As the vicar saw, I'm no murderer. The vicar, Poirot said, turning to Reverend Ellis. You, monsieur, wandered near the cliffs, seeking redemption or the gold you once hid. Your prayers in the conservatory were disturbed by Lady Beatrice at 9, yet you claim solitude. Why the discrepancy? Ellis's voice was low. I was troubled. The captain's greed haunted me. I wandered, but I harmed no one. Poirot raised a hand for silence. Enough. Let us now unravel the truth. The cufflink I presented yesterday a bluff. Ms. Amos provoked reactions. Dr. Hale's panic was genuine, but not because he dropped it. Someone else did, to cast suspicion. The key lies in the cave, the gold, and the precise timing of the tide. He paced, his voice growing intense. The captain was struck at 9:25. When the tide was low, the cave was accessible then. Someone knew he would go there, lured him with a promise or a threat. The argument Miss Evans witnessed was not random, it was planned. But who had the means, the motive, and the opportunity? He stopped, his eyes locking onto Lady Beatrice. Madam, you are the linchpin. Your marriage to the captain was strained by his paranoia and your financial ruin. You knew of the gold, its location whispered to you by Silas in a moment of trust or weakness. You saw Dr. Hale as a means to an end, rekindling old affections to secure an ally. But Hale was not your accomplice in murder. Hale exhaled, relief, washing over him. But Poirot continued. The true accomplice was closer Miss Evans. A gasp rippled through the room. Miss Evans took a step back, her face ashen. No, I only, silence, Poirot commanded. You, mademoiselle, have served this family for years, loyal to Lady Beatrice above all. She confided in you her desperation, her fear of ruin. Together, you devised a plan. Lady Beatrice lured the captain to the cliff path, claiming a need to discuss the gold. You, Miss Evans, waited nearby, in the shadows. When the argument escalated, you struck the blow a rock, perhaps, to the skull, then pushed him over the edge. You waited, ensuring the tide would rise to mask the crime, then discovered the body at 10:30. Lady Beatrice stood, trembling. This is outrageous. I did no such thing. Poirot ignored her, his voice relentless. The footprints in the cave to sets, one delicate, one sturdy, belonged to you and Miss Evans. You retrieved the gold that night, after the murder, hiding it elsewhere to secure your future. The cufflink, inscribed with Dr. Hale's initials, was planted by Miss Evans, found lost in the house weeks prior. To divert suspicion, Miss Evans broke, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't meant to happen like that. Beatrice begged me, said we'd be destitute, that Silas would ruin us all. I only meant to frighten him. But he lunged, and I hit him. The gold was for her, for us, to start anew. Lady Beatrice sank into her chair, sobbing. Gwen, no. You promised to stay silent. Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. The heart betrays, madam. Your loyalty to each other was your strength and your undoing. The inconsistencies, Miss Evans's delayed alarm, your false accusation of Hale, the missing gold, all pointed to a conspiracy born of desperation. Inspector Japp stepped forward, his face grim. That's enough for me, Poirot. Lady Beatrice Golding. Gwen Evans, you're under arrest for the murder of Captain Silas Golding. As Japp led them away, the room dissolved into stunned silence. Arthur stared in disbelief. Vickers muttered a curse, and Ellis prayed fervently. Hale, shaken, met my gaze, his relief palpable. Poirot turned to me, his eyes gleaming with quiet triumph. The little grey cells, Hastings, they never fail. The truth. It is like the tide. It always rises. As we prepared to depart, smugglers. Rest. I marveled at Poirot's genius, though a pang of sadness lingered for the broken lives left in the wake of greed. Chapter 11. The reflection. The sun dipped low over the Cornish horizon, painting the cliffs around Smuggler's Rest with a warm, amber glow that belied the somber mood within. The arrests of Lady Beatrice and Miss Gwen Evans had left the household in a state of stunned disarray, as if the very walls exhaled a collective sigh of relief and sorrow. Inspector Japp had escorted the two women to the village, where they would await formal charges, leaving the remaining occupants to grapple with the wreckage of shattered trust and exposed secrets. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, found myself both awed by Poirot's brilliance and heavy-hearted at the tragedy that had unfolded. Poirot and I had retired to the terrace overlooking the sea, where the air was crisp with the scent of salt and damp earth. He sat on a wicker chair, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes fixed on the distant waves that lapped gently now, a stark contrast to the storm that had mirrored the crime's ferocity. His expression was serene, almost philosophical, and I knew this was the moment when he would reflect not just on the case, but on the human frailties that drove it. Hastings, he said at last, his voice soft yet carrying that familiar cadence of conviction, the affair of the Golden Smuggler is concluded, yet it leaves a taste most bitter. The pursuit of gold. It corrupts as surely as the tide erodes the cliffs. I leaned against the balustrade, still processing the morning's revelations. It's a grim business, Poirot. Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans driven to murder by desperation. I can't help but pity them, despite their crime. He nodded, his mustache twitching slightly as he considered my words. Pity, but also understanding. The human heart, it is a labyrinth. Lady Beatrice, trapped in a marriage of convenience, saw no escape but through wealth. Miss Evans, loyal to a fault, allowed her devotion to blind her to morality. Together, they wove a plan born of necessity, yet doomed by its own intricacy. I frowned, recalling the tense scene in the drawing room. Your trap was masterful, Poirot, the cufflink bluff, the way you pressed their inconsistencies. But how did you know it was them and not, say, Dr. Hale or Vickers? Poirot's eyes gleamed with that quiet pride he permitted himself after a case well solved. The little grey cells, mon ami, they observe what others overlook. The tide. It was the first clue. Its timing contradicted the alibis. Miss Evans's delay in raising the alarm suggested intent, not accident. Then, Lady Beatrice's accusation of Dr. Haylett was too convenient, too swift, as if rehearsed to deflect suspicion. But the footprints in the cave cassettes, one delicate, one sturdy, pointed to collaboration. Only Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans fit. The mistress with knowledge of the gold, the maid with access and loyalty. He sipped his tisane, which a servant had brought out, and continued. The cufflink, a fabrication, was the spark. Dr. Hale's panic confirmed he was innocent but fearful. Miss Evans's breaking under pressure revealed her guilt. Lady Beatrice. She crumbled when her accomplice spoke, for their pact was their strength and their weakness. I shook my head, marveling. And the gold? Do you think Jap will find it? Poirot shrugged, a Gallic gesture of indifference. Perhaps, in some hidden nook of this estate. But for Poirot, the gold is secondary. It is the truth that matters, the order restored when chaos is untangled. The captain's greed set this tragedy in motion, but it was the hearts of those around him that carried it to its end. I gazed out at the sea, reflecting on his words. You always see the bigger picture, don't you? Not just the crime, but why it happened. Precisement, he replied, rising from his chair with a brisk adjustment of his coat. Crime, it is not merely an act but a story, a tale of motives, of passions misdirected. Hercule Poirot, he does not judge, he illuminates. And now, Hastings, we depart. The train to London awaits, and I crave the symmetry of my little apartment. After this wild coast, as we walked back through the house, passing the now empty drawing room where secrets had been laid bare, I caught sight of young Arthur Golding standing alone in the hall, staring at a portrait of his uncle. His face was a mask of grief and resolve, perhaps contemplating the burdens of inheritance now free of the gold's curse. Vickers had retreated to the billiard room, his gruff exterior softened by the ordeal, while Reverend Ellis knelt in the conservatory, praying with renewed fervor. Dr. Hale had left for the village, his reputation intact but his heart, I suspected, bruised by Lady Beatrice's betrayal. Poirot paused at the front door, his hand on the knob. Hastings, you see now why Poirot prefers the order of the mind to the chaos of the heart. The heart, it leads to murder. The mind, to justice. I smiled, accustomed to his pronouncements. And yet, Poirot, you understand the heart better than most. He chuckled softly, stepping out into the fading light. Perhaps, mon ami, but let us leave such mysteries to the poets. For Hercule Poirot, the little grey cells suffice. As we made our way to the waiting car that would take us to the station, the cliffs of Smuggler's Rest stood sentinel behind us, their secrets swept away like the tide. The case was closed, but its echoes would linger, a reminder of the fine line between desperation and damnation. Chapter 12. The echoes of the past train to London rattled along the tracks, its rhythmic clatter a soothing contrast to the turmoil we had left behind at Smuggler's Rest. The Cornish landscape receded into a blur of green hills and distant cliffs, and I, Captain Arthur Hastings, found myself lost in thought, the weight of the case still heavy on my mind. Hercule Poirot sat opposite me in our first-class compartment, his posture as impeccable as ever, his eyes half closed as if in meditation. Yet I knew his mind was far from idle. The little grey cells were likely still sifting through the intricacies of the golden smuggler's doom, tying up loose ends that only he could perceive. The compartment was quiet, save for the occasional whistle of the train and the soft rustle of Poirot turning the pages of a small notebook he had kept throughout the investigation. I broke the silence, unable to resist probing further. Poirot, I ventured, you've solved the case, and brilliantly, as always. But there's something nagging at me. The gold, do you truly believe it's still hidden somewhere on the estate? Or did Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans manage to spirit it away entirely? Poirot opened his eyes, a faint smile playing beneath his mustache. Mon ami, you are like the hound who cannot let go of the bone. The gold. It is a detail, a distraction from the human tragedy. But since you ask, I will indulge you. The gold is likely still concealed, perhaps in a secondary hiding place, a trunk or a locked chest within Smuggler's Rest. Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans had little time to move it far before the tide turned and the alarm was raised. Inspector Japp, he will search, and I have no doubt he will find it, for he is thorough, if not inspired. I nodded, though my curiosity was not fully sated. And what of the others, Arthur? Vickers? The vicar? Dr. Hale? They all had their secrets, their motives. Do you think they'll ever recover from this? Poirot's expression grew somber, his gaze drifting to the window where the countryside rolled by. Recover? Perhaps, in time, as the wound heals, but leaves a scar. Young Arthur Golding, he inherits a tainted legacy, but also a chance to rebuild. His debts may be eased if the gold is recovered, though he must learn from his uncle's greed. Vickers, a man of bluster, will return to his ventures, perhaps chastened by the nearness of suspicion. Reverend Ellis, he will pray for forgiveness, his faith tested but intact. As for Dr. Hale, Poirot paused, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. His heart, it is broken, not by guilt but by betrayal. Lady Beatrice used him as a shield, and that wound will linger. I leaned back, considering his words. It's a grim picture. Poirot, so much destruction from one man's obsession with gold. He agreed. But such is the nature of greed. It is like a fire, it consumes all in its path, friend and foe alike. Captain Golding's smuggling, his hoarding, it set the stage, but it was the choices of those around him that carried it to its end. Lady Beatrice, driven by fear of ruin, Miss Evans, by loyalty twisted into complicity. Their actions were not inevitable. Hastings, they chose their path. A thought struck me, one I had not voiced before. You know, Poirot, there's something almost poetic about it all. The gold, hidden in a cave, accessible only at low tide. It's as if the sea itself was complicit, guarding the secret until you unraveled it. Poirot chuckled, a rare warmth in his eyes. You surprise me, Hastings, with your poetic turn. But you are not wrong. The sea, she is a witness, silent but eloquent. The tides, they dictated the crime's rhythm, revealing the lies through their unyielding precision. Nature, she does not deceive. It is man who twists her truths. He closed his notebook with a snap, signaling a shift in mood. Enough reflection, mon ami. Let us speak of lighter things. London awaits, with its order, its symmetry. I long for a cup of my chocolate show, prepared just so, and the comfort of my armchair by the fire. I smiled, accustomed to his abrupt transitions from philosophy to practicality. And I, for a decent pub and a pint. Cornwall's been an adventure, but I'll be glad to be back in civilization. Poirot raised an eyebrow, his tone mockingly indignant. Civilization, Hastings. You wound me, for Hercule Poirot. Civilization is wherever the mind finds clarity, be it a Cornish cliff or a London flat. As the train carried us closer to the city, I glanced out at the fading light. The horizon now a deep indigo streaked with gold. The case of the Golden Smuggler had been a stark reminder of human frailty, but also of Poirot's unmatched ability to pierce the veil of deceit. The echoes of Smuggler's Rest would linger, but for now, we were bound for home, where new mysteries, no doubt, awaited. Chapter 13. The weight of Justice's London skyline loomed into view. As our train neared Paddington Station, its familiar spires and chimneys a welcome sight after the wild, windswept cliffs of Cornwall, the journey from Smuggler's Rest had been a quiet one, with Poirot and I each lost in our thoughts. The rhythm of the train a soothing counterpoint to the tumult of the case. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, felt a curious mix of relief and melancholy. The resolution of Captain Silas Golding's murder had restored order, as Poirot so often sought. But the cost 2 lives ruined by their own desperate choices cast a long shadow. Poirot sat across from me, his small frame nestled comfortably in the plush seat, his eyes fixed on a point beyond the window. His notebook lay closed on the table between us, its pages no longer needed now that the truth had been laid bare. Yet I sensed he was not entirely at ease. There was a furrow in his brow, a subtle sign that some aspect of the case still lingered. In his mind, Poirot, I ventured, breaking the silence, you seem pensive. The case is solved, the guilty are in custody, and Japp will handle the rest. What troubles you? He turned his gaze to me, his green eyes sharp yet softened by a hint of introspection. Troubles. Hastings. Not troubles precisely, but the mind of Hercule Poirot. It does not rest until every thread is tied. There's a question. Mon ami. That remains. The gold itself. Its recovery is a matter for Japp, yet its existence shaped the tragedy. I wonder if its discovery will bring peace to Smuggler's Rest or merely stir new conflicts. I leaned forward, intrigued. You think there's more to come? Surely with Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans arrested, the matter is settled. He tilted his head, a faint smile curving his lips. Settled, oui, for the law. But the heart, it does not settle so easily. Young Arthur Golding, for instance, he faces a future fraught with the legacy of his uncle's greed, and the other's Vickers. Ellis, Hale, they must live with the knowledge of their own complicity, however indirect, in the events that unfolded. I considered this, picturing the young heir standing alone in the hall of Smuggler's Rest, staring at his uncle's portrait. Arthur's got a rough road ahead, hasn't he? The estate's debts, the scandal. Do you think he'll sell the place? Poirot shrugged, a Gallic gesture that conveyed both indifference and wisdom. Perhaps Hastings, or perhaps he will rise to the challenge, as the young sometimes do when burdened with responsibility. The gold, if found, may ease his financial woes, but it cannot erase the stain of murder. He must forge his own path, free of the shadow of the Golden Smuggler. The train slowed as we approached the station, the hustle of London life filtering through the windows, porters shouting, the clatter of luggage, the distant hum of motor cars. Poirot gathered his belongings with his usual meticulous care, adjusting his hat and smoothing his coat. Come, mon ami, he said briskly. The city calls, and I have a craving for order after the chaos of the coast. We disembarked and made our way through the crowded platform, Poirot navigating the throng with the ease of a man accustomed to precision even in disorder. As we hailed a taxi to his flat in Whitehaven Mansions, I couldn't resist one final question. Poirot, do you ever feel the weight of it all? The lives broken, the secrets you uncover? You always seem so detached. He paused, his hand on the taxi door. and regarded me with a look that was both penetrating and kind. Detached. Hastings. Not detached, disciplined. The heart of Hercule Poirot. It feels, but it does not rule. To solve a crime, one must see clearly without the fog of sentiment. Yet I am not immune to the tragedy. Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans, they chose their fate, but it was a choice born of desperation. That is the weight of justice. It restores order, but it cannot heal the wounds it exposes. I nodded, struck by the depth of his insight. You're right, of course. It's a heavy business, but someone's got to do it, and no one does it better than you. He chuckled, stepping into the taxi. Flattery, Hastings. It becomes you. Now, let us return to civilization, where the chocolate show awaits and the world, for a moment, is symmetrical. As the taxi wove through London's bustling streets, I glanced at Poirot, his profile serene against the city's backdrop. The case of the Golden Smuggler had been a stark reminder of the destructive power of greed and loyalty misplaced, but it had also reaffirmed my faith in Poirot's unmatched ability to bring light to the darkest corners. We were back in London, where new adventures no doubt awaited, but for now, the echoes of Smuggler's Rest faded into the hum of the city, leaving only the certainty of justice served. Chapter 14. The unseen thread. The morning sun bathed Smuggler's Rest in a deceptive calm, its golden rays glinting off the Cornish cliffs as if to erase the shadows of the previous day's revelations. The arrests of Lady Beatrice Golding and Miss Gwen Evans had sent ripples of shock through the household, yet the air remained heavy with an unspoken question. Had all secrets truly been laid bare? Miss Jane Marple, seated in the drawing-room with a cup of tea cradled in her delicate hands, appeared as serene as ever, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles, observing the subtle shifts in the faces around her. To Captain Arthur Hastings, who stood by the window gazing at the now tranquil sea, her calm was both reassuring and unsettling, for he knew that Miss Marple's quiet demeanor often concealed a mind, unraveling threads others failed to see. The drawing-room, once a stage for Poirot's dramatic confrontations, now felt like a parlor in St. Mary Mead, where Miss Marple's village wisdom had so often pierced the veil of deceit. Young Arthur Golding sat slumped in an armchair, his face etched with the weight of his uncle's tainted legacy. Mr. Reginald Vickers paced near the fireplace, his scowl softened by a flicker of unease, as if the resolution had not fully quelled his suspicions. Reverend Ellis, clutching his Bible, murmured prayers, his piety a shield against the lingering guilt of his wartime complicity. Dr. Elias Hale, his reputation cleared but his heart bruised by Lady Beatrice's betrayal, adjusted his spectacles nervously, avoiding the others' gazes. Only Miss Marple, with her neat shawl and unassuming air, seemed untouched by the room's tension, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically as she observed. "Hastings, my dear," she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle cadence of an elderly spinster. "You are troubled, I see. The case is solved, yet something nags at you, does it not?" Hastings turned from the window, his honest face betraying his unease. "You're right, Miss Marple. It's all wrapped up, Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans confessed. The motive was clear. The gold's likely hidden somewhere on the estate, but I can't shake the feeling that we've missed something. It's too neat." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, a faint smile curving her lips. "Neatness, Captain Hastings, is often a fourwayed. In my little village of St. Mary Mead, I once knew a young woman who seemed the picture of innocence, yet her tidy accounts hid a theft. So it is here. The human heart, you see, is rarely so orderly as we wish. There is an unseen thread in this affair, one that tugs at the edges of our solution. Hastings frowned, settling into a chair opposite her. An unseen thread? But Miss Evans admitted to striking the captain, and Lady Beatrice orchestrated the plan. The footprints in the cave, the delayed alarm, it all fits. Indeed, Miss Marple agreed, her needles pausing briefly. But consider, my dear, the nature of loyalty. Miss Evans's devotion to Lady Beatrice was profound. Yet such loyalty can blind one to other truths. In St. Mary Mead, I recall, a maid who protected her mistress, only to overlook the mistress's own protector. I wonder, did Miss Evans act alone in her loyalty, or was there another, guiding her hand? Before Hastings could respond, the door opened, and Inspector Japp entered, his bluff demeanor tempered by fatigue. "Miss Marple," he said, tipping his hat, "I've just come from the village. The ladies are in custody, and we've men searching the estate for that gold. But there's something new turned up this morning in the captain's study, tucked behind a painting." He produced a small, sealed envelope, its edges yellowed but intact, addressed in a bold hand to my heir. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened, though her expression remained placid. "Most intriguing, Inspector. May I?" She took the envelope, her fingers deftly breaking the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in Captain Golding's sprawling script, a letter, dated the day before his death. "Read it aloud, if you please," she said, handing it to Hastings, who cleared his throat and began, "To Arthur, my heir, if you read this, I am gone, and the truth must be told. The gold, hidden in the cave, is but a fraction of my wealth. The greater share lies elsewhere, known only to one other, who has sworn secrecy. I have been betrayed, not by greed alone, but by a heart I trusted. Beware the one who knows too much, for they hold the key to ruin. Trust not the pious, nor the proud, nor the penitent, they all seek what is mine. I go tonight to secure my legacy, for I fear treachery." Silas Golding. A hush fell over the room. Arthur's face paled, his hands gripping the chair. Another hiding place, and someone else knew. But who? Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her gaze distant yet piercing. "A heart he trusted, most revealing. In my village, there was once a man who hid his savings, trusting only his closest confidant. Yet that confidant betrayed him for love. Captain Golding's letter suggests a second conspirator, one who knew of the greater fortune but did not act with Lady Beatrice or Miss Evans. We must consider who stood to gain most and who was closest to his secrets." Vickers snorted, breaking the silence. "More riddles. The old fool was paranoid, scribbling nonsense to torment us. The gold's in the cave, or those women took it. Perhaps," Miss Marple said mildly, "but paranoia often masks truth. Let us reflect on the captain's words. The pious, the proud, the penitent. In St. Mary Mead, such labels often hid deeper motives. Reverend Ellis, you are pious, yet you admitted to hiding gold for the captain during the war. Were you privy to more than you've told?" Ellis's knuckles whitened on his Bible. "I've confessed my part, Miss Marple. I hid a shipment once, in the church crypt, but I knew nothing of another fortune." He mocked my faith, said I'd never see a penny more. Miss Marple nodded, turning to Vickers. "And you, Mr. Vickers, might be called proud, with your demands for your share. Did the captain ever hint at a greater hoard? Perhaps during your wartime dealings?" Vickers's scowl deepened. "He was cagey, always talking in circles, said the real wealth was safe from prying eyes. But I thought he meant the cave. If there's more, I've no idea where. And you, Dr. Hale?" Miss Marple continued, her tone gentle but relentless, "might be the penitent, with your past attachment to Lady Beatrice. Did the captain confide in you, perhaps in a moment of trust, before jealousy soured your bond?" Hale's spectacles slipped, his voice sharp. "I knew nothing of his gold beyond rumors. He accused me of scheming with Beatrice, but I was only her friend. If he hid more, he never told me." Miss Marple's eyes lingered on Arthur, who shifted uncomfortably. "And you, Mr. Golding, the heir. The letter is addressed to you, yet you claim ignorance of this greater fortune. In my village, heirs often know more than they admit, even to themselves." Arthur flushed. "I swear, Miss Marple, I only knew of the cave from whispers. Uncle Silas was secretive. He'd never share such a secret, not even with me." She inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "Very well, but the letter suggests a betrayal, a heart trusted. We must consider who stood closest to Captain Golding, beyond Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans." Japp scratched his head. "This is all very well, Miss Marple, but we've got our killers. Why stir up more trouble? The letter's probably a madman's rant." Miss Marple's smile was patient. "In St. Mary Mead, Inspector, I once solved a theft because a man's rant hid a truth. The captain feared treachery, and his letter points to someone who knew his plans that night. We must revisit the alibis, the moments before his death. Hastings, what do you recall of the night's timeline?" Hastings flipped through his notebook, his brow furrowed. "Dinner ended at 8. The captain argued with Beatrice, Vickers, and Ellis, then left around 8:30, saying he'd secure his legacy. He was struck at 9:25, per his watch, and Miss Evans saw the scuffle but delayed the alarm until 10:30. "Precisely," Miss Marple said, her needles resuming their rhythm. "And during that hour, where were our suspects?" "Mr. Vickers, you were in the billiard room, seen by Reverend Ellis at 9:30. Reverend, you were in the conservatory, disturbed by Lady Beatrice at 9. Dr. Hale, you claimed the upper path at 9:15, hearing the tide incorrectly. And Mr. Golding, you were in the library, reviewing accounts." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "But there's a gap, is there not, between 8:30 and 9:25. Someone met the captain on the path, someone he trusted enough to argue with openly. Miss Evans saw a tall figure, but shadows deceive. In my village, a tall shadow once proved to be a woman in a cloak, standing on a rise. We must consider all possibilities." A sudden knock interrupted her. A constable entered, holding a small, tarnished key, its surface engraved with a nautical emblem. "Found this, mum, in the captain's desk drawer, hidden in a false bottom. Doesn't match any lock we've tried yet." Miss Marple's fingers stilled, her gaze fixed on the key. "A key to ruin, perhaps," she murmured. "In St. Mary Mead, a hidden key once unlocked a chest of secrets. This may lead to the greater fortune or to the heart of the betrayal. Inspector, I suggest a thorough search of the captain's private quarters, particularly for locked compartments or safes." Japp nodded, though his expression was skeptical. "Right? I'll have the men look. But you're sure there's more to this, Miss Marple?" "Oh, quite sure," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "The captain's letter is a warning, and warnings, in my experience, are never idle. Someone in this house knows more than they've admitted, and that key may unlock the final truth." As Japp departed to organize the search, the suspects exchanged uneasy glances. Arthur's hands trembled slightly. Vickers muttered under his breath. Ellis's prayers grew louder, and Hale stared at the floor, lost in thought. Hastings leaned closer to Miss Marple, whispering, "Do you think there's another conspirator? Someone who manipulated Beatrice and Evans?" Miss Marple's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. "In St. Mary Mead, my dear, I learned that every crime has its ripples. Lady Beatrice and Miss Evans acted out of desperation, but desperation is often kindled by another's influence. We shall see, Hastings, when the key turns and the truth is revealed." The room fell silent. The only sound the distant crash of waves and the soft click of Miss Marple's knitting needles, weaving a net as subtle and inescapable as her village wisdom. Outside, the cliffs stood sentinel, guarding their secrets. But within Smuggler's Rest, the unseen thread was tightening, and Hastings knew the final revelation was near. Chapter 15. The final reflection. The drawing room of Thornfield Hall was silent, save for the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The assembled guests sat in a semicircle, their faces pale and drawn, each processing the revelations of the evening. Miss Jane Marple sat at the center, her small frame upright in a high-backed chair, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked on a delicate lace shawl. Her eyes, sharp and bright, surveyed the room with quiet satisfaction. Captain Hastings, seated to her right, leaned forward, his notebook open on his lap. He had scribbled furiously during Miss Marple's explanation, trying to capture every detail of her meticulous unraveling of the crime. Now, as the room settled into an uneasy calm, he glanced at her, marveling at the clarity of her mind. "It is always the small things," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of authority. "The overlooked, the dismissed, the seemingly trivial. In St. Mary Mead, I have seen it time and again. People think their secrets are safe because they are small. But it is the small things that betray us." She paused, her needles pausing mid-stitch, and looked at each person. In turn, Lady Eleanor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, stared at the floor. Dr. Hargrove, his face flushed with shame, avoided her gaze. Mrs. Langley, who had wept silently through the revelation, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Inspector Davies, standing near the door, gave a slow nod of respect, though his expression betrayed his frustration at being outdone by an elderly spinster. "It was the scarf, you see," Miss Marple continued, resuming her knitting. "Mrs. Whitmore's green silk scarf, found in the library, knotted so tightly around her neck. Everyone assumed it was hers because it matched her dress that evening. But I noticed something curious. The scarf was not hers at all. It was Miss Celia's. Identical in color, but slightly frayed at the hem. A detail only someone who pays attention to such things would notice." Hastings shifted in his seat, recalling the moment Miss Marple had pointed out the frayed hem during her explanation. It had seemed so insignificant at the time, yet it had unraveled the entire case. "Celia," Miss Marple said, turning her gaze to the young woman, who sat rigid, her face a mask of defiance. "You were clever. You used the scarf to make it seem as though Mrs. Whitmore had been strangled in a moment of passion. But you did not account for the fact that Mrs. Whitmore's own scarf was still in her room, neatly folded in her drawer. That was your mistake." Celia's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Her hands, clenched in her lap, betrayed her composure. And then there was the matter of the clock. Miss Marple went on, her tone almost conversational. "The library clock stopped at precisely 9:17 p.m. Everyone assumed it had been broken. During the struggle, but I found it curious that the glass face was intact. A stopped clock is a deliberate act, meant to mislead. You, Celia, set it to 9:17 to establish your alibi, knowing you were seen in the garden at that time. But you forgot the sound of the clock's chime, which Dr. Hargrove heard at 9:30, proving the murder occurred later. Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat, his voice hoarse. I should have realized. I heard the chime, but I thought nothing of it. Miss Marple gave him a kind, almost pitying smile. You were distracted, Doctor, by your own secrets. Your affair with Mrs. Langley, your fear of exposure, it clouded your judgment. But it was not your crime. Mrs. Langley let out a small sob, and Lady Eleanor reached over to pat her hand, though her own expression remained strained. The final piece, Miss Marple said, was the letter, Mrs. Whitmore's letter to her solicitor, found torn in the grate. It was not, as you all believed, a letter about her will. It was a confession, written in haste, revealing that she knew of Celia's plan to ruin her husband's business dealings. Celia, you could not allow that letter to reach its destination. You killed her to silence her, and you burned the letter to cover your tracks. But you did not notice the fragment that remained, caught in the grate, a fragment with your initials. Celia's facade cracked. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You have no proof, she cried, her voice shrill. This is all conjecture. Miss Marple raised an eyebrow, unruffled. The fragment is with Inspector Davies, my dear, and your fingerprints were on the ink bottle in Mrs. Whitmore's room. You were careful, but not careful enough. Inspector Davies stepped forward, his face grim. Miss Celia Thornton, you are under arrest for the murder of Mrs. Beatrice Whitmore. As Celia was led away, the room seemed to exhale. The tension that had gripped Thornfield Hall for days began to dissipate, replaced by a heavy, mournful silence. Miss Marple set her knitting aside and rose, smoothing her skirt with a precise gesture. Come, Hastings, she said quietly. I believe our work here is done. They stepped out into the cool night air, the stars bright above the estate. Hastings, still processing the evening's events, turned to her. Miss Marple, how do you do it? How do you see what no one else sees? She smiled, a faint, knowing smile. It is not about seeing, Captain Hastings. It is about understanding. People are much the same, whether in St. Mary Mead or a grand estate like this. They hide their fears, their desires, their guilt, but they cannot hide them from the truth. They walked down the gravel path toward the waiting car, the lights of Thornfield Hall fading behind them. Miss Marple paused, glancing back at the house. It is a sad business, murder, she said softly, but there's always order in the end. The truth restores it. Hastings nodded, though he knew he would never fully grasp the workings of her remarkable mind. As they drove away, the quiet village of St. Mary Mead beckoned, and Miss Marple settled back in her seat, already thinking of her garden and the next small mystery that might cross her path.